of May's University series on Pirkei Avot. So, who has been a part of the other weeks by a show of hands? Oh, great. Will someone give me an overview of what you've talked about the other weeks so that I make sure I don't cover it quickly? Has someone explained what Pirkei Avot is conceptually as a whole book?
Go, Renee. You're good at that stuff.
Well, I'm no expert on Pirkei Avot, but Pirkei Avot strikes me as something like folk wisdom. Lots of wonderful, pithy sayings that have a very wide appeal, lots of wisdom, but also very accessible.
There you go. Nice. See, and that's why I asked you.
So every teacher has taught us about how it starts with the genealogy of how it came down to us.
Okay.
So do not do that again, please.
I won't. What have they said about that?
Well, it gives it its authenticity. I mean, just the passing down from here to here to here to here. It gives the generations and the transmission.
Great. And the notion that, this is the only thing I'll say about that section, that this whole idea within Judaism that has become taken for granted, this notion of that transmission, right? Like, I'm not saying in a historical sense, but within just like a normative Jewish understanding sense, that's how Judaism's understood. It originates there. That's the only textual reference we have to that idea itself.
For those who knew him, Rabbi Zimmond was particularly fond of this and taught a wonderful course, multi-years, it never ended, on Pirkei Avot. And nice. So if you go into any just like one little tiny part, he used to chew it apart with the historicity of it. It made it really fascinating. I remember we spent weeks on a section that was more or less about the relationship to the Romans, but is kind of disguised in like, were you going to go with power or not go with power? What was your place as a citizen? And he kept completely flipping the way we looked at that question in this little tiny piece.
Nice.
I'm done.
Marion, while you were waving your arm, the cat was wagging his tail right next to you.
I know that cat.
A well-trained animal, Bobby.
So where does Pirkei Avot come from? Where in Jewish literature is it? Is anyone?
It's in Talmud.
Okay, yeah, right. It's in the Mishnah, which is codified in just about exactly the year 200 CE. And the Mishnah, as we've seen in Talmud, in our sort of Talmud shiur that's been going on for 2 years, the Mishnah is the core of the Talmud. And it's really an anthology of the oral traditions more than it is any attempt to create a normative code of law. And I actually think that shows up in maybe its clearest way in Pirkei Avot. And one of the things that's really distinctive about Mishnah Avot, Pirkei Avot, is that it's really the only Talmudic tractate, the only Mishnaic tractate, certainly, that isn't concerned with Jewish law, right? So sometimes it's known as the ethics of our ancestors, right? I'm sure people have heard that term before. They don't mean ethics there in the traditional sense or in the sense that we often mean ethics. They mean ethics in the sense as opposed to Jewish law, that this isn't like legal stuff. It's they use ethics much closer to how we might use the word values, maybe.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense? Right? In a contemporary sense, we tend to use ethics as a universal word. Right? There is universal ethics that we are striving towards understanding, right? How to treat people correctly and so on and so forth. And ethics in that sense is secular. It's a branch of the secular university and originates in science as opposed to traditions that originate in received wisdom, like a Jewish tradition. Does that make sense? Just as sort of taking apart that word for a second?
Yeah.
And the difference.
Okay.
So I just want to separate that out because that's what we mean by ethics when we're talking about Pirkei Avot, not this kind of contemporary meaning. So what's distinctive, the other distinctive piece about Avot is I believe it's the only, it may be one of a few, but I think it's the only tractate in the Mishnah that doesn't get a commentary in the Gemara. I know there's some other tractates that like don't get it in the Babylonian Talmud, but get it in the Jerusalem Talmud, and there may be some other minor ones that don't, but it is one of the distinctive things about Avot is that it doesn't get anything in the Gemara. There's a sort of commentary on Avot that sort of functions as its Gemara, Avot de Rabbi Natan, which if you've studied with me enough, we've studied a couple texts from it, but there's no Gemara on it. There's no later commentary, so it sits on its own as this guide for the judges or guide for people, or who was it at the beginning? Was it Renee who compared it to like Proverbs?
Folk wisdom. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Proverbs in the folk sense, and also at some level, kind of Proverbs like the book, like Mishle. Right, there's that quality there too.
Yeah.
Okay, any thoughts on that? So this time period and the original inspiration for studying Pirkei Avot right now is there is a tradition that you study Pirkei Avot. Some people study it during the weeks of the Omer, 5 chapters. Some say 6 chapters. It depends on how you count Pirkei Avot, what you call as a vote. 1 per week leading until the Shavuos. Some people study it all through the summer through Rosh Hashanah over and over again as a cycle, but regardless, it's a custom. So the original idea, as I understood it, was we were each going to do a chapter 1 a week. So this would be chapter 5. I don't get the sense, after having talked to Randy, at least, he's the only one I connected with, that has any bearing on anything else that anyone's done. I am getting the sense that maybe Avot 1-1 we're going to skip. But other than that, my thought was then we're going to look at chapter 5 today. Chapter 5 is distinctive. And there are a few different sections of Pirkei Avot at some level. Chapter 2, for instance, did Rabbi Jim do chapter 2 by any chance? So chapter 2 is given in the name of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, the great mystic.
I know he does.
Probably. He loves Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai.
Yeah, exactly, right? Then you get chapters like chapter 5. And as we'll see, chapter 5 really, I think, illustrates the underlying oral nature of the creation of this document. And I want to take apart what I just said there for a second, the oral nature of the creation of this document. I really get the sense as you look at this chapter that you can see a group of people in a room talking and having their memories triggered through some of these mnemonics. That we tend to think about the ways that people memorized the Tanas, the walking oral books, the way that they memorized these things as some of these tricks, but it also works in the other direction. That as they get going with some of these mnemonics, it turns into a game for people to come up with as well. I think we'll see that in chapter 5. Okay, any questions about any of that before we jump in here, though?
I guess no.
Okay. Just a reminder, if you were watching this on Facebook, there should be a link that you can click on to join the Zoom meeting. Or if you're watching this wherever you are, there should be a link. Or go to centralreform.org and find the event and click on it there so that you can be a part of the conversation. Okay, here we go with Safaria. Everyone sees this, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thought I had it up at a vote, but regardless.
When did you become Canadian?
What do you mean?
Up in a boot?
Okay. So let me zoom this in a little bit. So the beginning here, this first section in chapter 5, I think we're going to see that actually the theme is just numbers. Like, oh, here's a list of 10 things. I know a list of 10 things. Someone else knows a list of 10 things. Sometimes they're interesting. Sometimes they're less interesting. So will someone take a vote 5-1, this first Mishnah here?
With 10 utterances, the world was created. And what does this teach? For surely it could have been created with one utterance.
Okay,
But
so
this-
what's the question that they're asking?
Why there's 10 and not just one?
Okay.
Quite literally.
And we're also getting a statement of cosmology here, right?
Okay.
That the world was created in 10 utterances. Okay, keep going.
But this was so in order to punish the wicked, who destroyed the world that was created with 10 utterances, and to give a good reward to the righteous, who maintain the world that was created with 10 utterances.
Okay, what's happening here?
I'm not sure. I understand the first sentence and the question, but what is the second part about wicked destroying and righteous maintaining? I mean, what does 10 utterances have to do with that?
Anyone have a thought here?
There's something like a balancing act going on. You know, the wicked have, created 10 evil utterances. So then there's these 10 utterances that are good for the righteous. So to balance that.
Nice. Anyone have another thought here?
That maybe you can't destroy it as easily because it was created in 10 separate utterances. You know?
Oh, okay. I hadn't thought of it that way. I like that. So my read on this, and I could totally be the wrong read here too, has been, and maybe I'm not even sure it answers the question, so maybe it is the wrong read. But the rabbis very much understand that words have an incredible amount of power to create and destroy. And they have a conception that worlds can be made and destroyed through what people say or what they don't say, right? Think about the focus on not saying false things that we've seen if you've studied the Pardes story with me. Or we find this pretty regularly. It's in a number of the prayers, the rabbinically composed prayers. So I think that's part of what's going on here, maybe. Any other thoughts before we go on?
Well, I think you're on the right path, Danny.
Okay, let's look at number 2 here. You'll see the theme continuing of 10. Someone else read, please.
There were 10 generations from Adam to Noah in order to make known what long suffering is his. For all those generations kept on provoking him until he brought upon them the waters of the flood.
Okay, first let's pause for a second. What is the him here?
God.
Okay, so just whoever's reading, I invite you, if you'd like to de-gender Safaria's translation here, as to your comfort, but totally up to the reader. So what's happening here? What are they saying? Hey, actually, go ahead and finish this Mishnah. Let's take it as a whole. You keep reading, Paul.
Okay, there were 10 generations from Noah to Abraham in order to make known what long suffering is his or her. For all those generations kept on provoking him or her until...
Up. Scroll up.
Scroll up, please. Until Abraham came and received the reward of all of them.
Okay. Someone take this apart. What's happening here?
Go ahead.
Do you want to see it? Should I make it show back up? I'm sorry.
No, I can find it.
So someone want to take this apart?
Well, he's saying that God put up with man for 10 generations, and then he basically got fed up with him and took him out, which we're forgetting a generation where I can't remember the name of, it went up to heaven and didn't come back.
Right, Enoch. There you go. Yeah.
So, but other than that generation, everybody was upsetting him. So you start over. Okay,
Nice.
now we've got another 10 generations, and he's getting ready to say, start over, but Abraham appears. And Abraham is a good man. He's following the rules. He's willing to kill his son because of the fact that God just says kill his son. And because of the fact that he is willing to follow that much, all of a sudden God will give him a chance. And Abraham received the reward, such that which was basically his line now becomes the chance for the world, sort of.
So I think Natalie's pulling out some sort of, in some ways, classical Jewish theology. And one of the things I hope we see here is that actually this is the source of that read, and it's a read that's become so mainstream that it's in some ways just normative, but this is where it comes from. And it's a read of the Bible that reads the first, Abraham shows up in chapter 12, so the first 11 chapters of the Bible like this, which is that in the beginning there is attempt 1.0 to have the correct earth. Humans do it wrong, and so there's an attempt at a reboot, right? So humans 2.0 is the world of Noah, right? And then that is seen as no longer working. So there's attempt 3.0. And attempt 3.0 is to do it not with all of humanity, but instead to work through one individual and their family and eventually their tribe to bring this about in the world, right? The story of Abraham. And the rest of the Torah imagines itself as 3.0. By the way, Christianity imagines itself as 4.0 and Islam imagines itself as 5.0, right? Like they continue on the same, and that kind of framing actually is what's his name? Thomas Friedman in his I forgot what book, but he presents it that way back in early 2000, the sort of religious traditions that way. But this is the first framing that we get of that. This is where that comes from, that sort of classic way of reading it that in some ways maps onto some Christian eschatological thinking, right? Like time periods towards the end of the world. Judaism moves away from that after the time of the Mishnah, but within the Mishnah, there's a lot of flirting with that kind of thinking, right? There's a reason that early Christianity, which is a Jewish movement, has that. And I think that's what we're getting a little of here. Okay, did that make sense? Thoughts, comments, reactions?
Can we assume that we're still provoking the God?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's really interesting, the use of, I don't know what the original Hebrew is, but the notion of that humankind is provoking God.
Yeah. What an interesting concept that is raised there.
Well, if we were, there'd be another reboot.
Yeah, be careful when you open up the news, wondering whether or not we're in one, Bobby.
Yeah. This one always gives me the idea that he's on vacation in Argentina or something.
There you go. So we can. That's what happens in Safari. Is the problem? You hit a button and it all go away. There we go. So we continue this theme of tens, right? And people throw out stories of 10 things, 10 trials of Abraham. There are 10 miracles. In fact, here you just get a list of 10s. 10 miracles in Egypt, 10 at the sea, 10 plagues. There are 10 trials. There are 10. You see this sort of oral sense of them throwing it out. I want to focus on this next one. This is a really interesting one to me.
Before we do that, can I just ask you something? I mean,
yeah.
We always talk about how 7 is a holy number and 18, but we never discuss 10. But here it's all 10, 10, 10.
So we get other collections. Pirkei Avot is in some ways famous for its collections of numerically organized things. Right, like maybe the most famous part of Pirkei Avot, a line so often quoted that it's almost cliched, is on 3 things the world stands, right? Al Shlosha Devarim, on Avodah, which which is usually translated in this context as worship. I don't think it's a good translation, but right. Avodah, what is it?
Torah,
Avodah, and Gemilut Chesed. Yeah, thank you, Lisa. And acts of loving kindness. So, but that is part of a collection of threes. If you go to that chapter in Pirkei Avot, you'll see all sorts of threes. It's not the only upon three things the world stands. So this is our tens. Okay, let's look at this next. Oh, go ahead. Was someone gonna say something?
Yeah, there's a certain kind of universal fallback to these numbers. I mean, 10, that's easy, you know? And as for 3, okay, it's a very stable, you know, like a stool with 3 legs. But, and my, you know, I was told this once by a teacher, 3 sex organs. And that the Mesopotamian numerical system, which we still in some ways use, 360 degrees in a circle, traces its lineage all the way back to that thinking. So, I mean, it starts with us. You know, how do we order the universe? It looks like us. So there's 3 things, and then there's 10 things.
Yeah, love it.
I don't know. It's just it's somewhat arbitrary, but people seem. It makes it makes people feel like there's order when there often doesn't seem to be.
Yeah.
You're right.
Okay, let's take this next one. Someone want to read it?
Can you make it a little bigger?
10 wonders were wrought for our ancestors in the temple. 1, no woman miscarried. I need to find it.
Sorry. Yep.
No woman miscarried from the odor of sacred flesh. 2, the sacred flesh never became putrid. 3, no fly has ever been seen in the slaughterhouse. 4, no emission occurred to the high priest on the Day of Atonement.
Okay, let's pause as we're going through this. Sure. What is this? If you were making a list of the 10 great miracles of the world, would any of these have made the top 10? So what's happening here?
It's pretty amazing. There's no fly in the slaughterhouse.
Yes, that is pretty amazing.
There's a sort of suspension of the natural laws of, suspension of the natural laws.
Okay.
Everything, things smell, things putrefy, men have emissions, you know, I don't know.
Sounds very sterile.
Well,
they're doing the opposite. Like never did a serpent, never did. Jerusalem was never too crowded for me to find a place to lodge overnight.
So let's go through these one by one and see if there's a theme that emerges. So no woman miscarried from the odor of sacred flesh. What is does that make any sense to anyone?
Not a woman.
Is the sacred flesh the sacrifice?
Yeah, exactly. First of all, remember the temple will have smelled terribly. Maimonides' whole point is the reason that there is incense is because it all smelled. Right? He's probably right about that.
Okay.
But there seems to be a understanding, clearly not scientific, but in their world, women miscarry from bad smells. Right? And yet one of the miracles is that never happened. Another miracle is that the meat never went bad, which would have caused all sorts of issues with ritual purity. Again, right? Just like women. 3, no fly was ever seen. Same issues with ritual purity, right? Like if you're thinking of this in a Talmudic perspective, when you think about the arguments of the rabbis, right? Like they'll go, particularly if you spend some time in Bava Metzia with me over the last couple of years, right? Like they'll go into insane detail about some tiny little thing and that's the reason why you can't do whatever, right? And so that's what we're getting here is it would have been a real problem in terms of the eating the sacred offering if flies were laying their eggs because you're not allowed to eat insects. Right? So I think what we're seeing here is a list of things that the rabbis are saying, sometimes you can't control everything and we're just going to write it off. I think that's what they're seeing, right? The no omission occurred to the priest on the Day of Atonement. The problem being, if that happened to the high priest, like nothing else would work. That would be the end of Yom Kippur. It wouldn't work that day. The ritual can't happen. Done. The wind did not, right? The wind didn't blow the wrong way for the smoke. The no defect was found in the Omer. The people, how is it that it's described that when people would gather at the temple in Jerusalem, everyone was pressed so tightly that there was no room, and yet also everyone had to lay down and prostrate themselves. Like both those things can't happen. And there was always room enough for a lodger.
Danny.
Yeah.
The truth is that all of these things would have happened, right?
Yeah. Yeah, good.
So there's something there, like we're going to say they didn't happen because they should not have happened. I mean, it's a strange kind of Disneyfication of what the abattoir that was the, temple must have been. I'm not sure what it's all about. I'd never noticed this part before. Thank you.
So I really, the reason I raised it today is I really resonated with it right now, in the sense that, like, I feel like I'm drawing all sorts of arbitrary lines. Do I wipe off my groceries when they come into the house or not? Do they, like, and I've gotten to the point where there's some things where I can even look and say, yes, I know that there's risk involved on the other side of that line, but I've decided this is where I'm drawing my line. And like, I'm done wiping my groceries. I wash my hands when I put them away, but like I put my groceries away, I don't wipe them down. And I've just decided, like, I'm not going to get infected from, maybe I will, maybe it'll happen, God forbid. But like, so that's how I resonated with this Mishnah.
Also, there's like something here of like the myth of the golden age, when everything like worked out perfectly.
I love that. I love that. Yeah.
Great.
Say that again, Lisa.
Jerusalem was great.
Yeah.
There's a certain element of nostalgia.
Right.
And we can ask whether we can make Jerusalem great again, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah, right.
Nice. Nice.
That's good.
Okay, so it's also, the other piece I want us to see there, because I think it's going to continue, is it's also moving the story forward of tens and miracles, right? We're used to expecting that there were 10 let me say this differently. Miracles for the ancient rabbis who are writing the Talmud also only happened in the mythical past.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? Right? Like everyone always has miracles in the mythical past. And even those people who lived in times that we imagine as the mythical past, think like Camelot time periods, right? If you lived in the Middle Ages, for them, miracles happened in their mythical past. Mm-hmm. And so part of what we're seeing here is that the temple and the functionings of the temple have stopped being part of the realistic present or future and have moved to the mystical past. The time when miracles could have happened. Again, they're pretty small miracles, so I think some of it's playing with that too. And there may be this may be tongue in cheek. That's the other piece here. Someone may be a little snarky with this list.
Yeah.
Okay, so we keep going?
Sure.
Hey, Renee, that's the Bobby.
Wait, just to clarify, Danny?
Yeah.
Is this being written about 200 years after there was, in fact, any sacrifice going on?
So here's what we know about Pirkei Avot. The rabbis who appear in it lived in time periods that we think are basically 200 BCE to 200 CE or so. It's being compiled by 200 because it's part of the Mishnah.
So in fact, somebody could have written this a good chunk after a long time since anybody had seen a real sacrifice in the temple.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
In which case it does take on kind of a humorous, like magical way that it was that could never have been.
Right.
And I would encourage us to think not in terms of a chunk being written after, but in some ways all of it is written after, because the entire putting it down onto paper occurs after the temple's been gone for 130 years.
Yeah.
So even the stories that themselves are put into the mouths of the ancients are being told by people who their great-grandparents weren't alive in the temple.
So excuse me, I know I'm talking a lot, but it's a little bit like when all of us tease kids about how when I was a kid, I walked uphill to school, a mile through the snow, and walked down.
Right.
Uphill both ways.
I never thought about this, but if you could put your tongue in your cheek and read it a little bit that way.
Well, Marion, just think of John Cleese writing a religious treatise, and then you got it all.
That's good.
Look, the timing difference probably is closest to something like the romanticization of the shtetl in Ashkenazi American thinking.
Yeah.
Right. Actually, the timing lines up.
That's good, Danny. Yeah.
Okay. Let's keep going. Let's do another Mishnah here.
Bum, 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 bum.
Okay, here's the 10. There's another 10 of things that are created. Look, a lot of these are really interesting, but we're just going to kind of skip them.
We're at 7. Hallelujah.
Just for Bobby. Just for Bobby. There we go. Bobby, you want to read this for us in honor of your number?
There are 7 things characteristic in a clod and 7 in a wise man. This is John.
Okay, so first of all, I love this. Like, I'm going to look at the Hebrew quickly. Golem. The word is golem.
Golem. A golem is not a clod of earth. A golem. Yeah. I understand the translation. A clod of earth. Yeah.
Okay, so now we're seeing the distinction between someone who's wise and someone who's
created by other people.
He's a clod of earth. Oh, I like that thinking, Bobby. Though probably golem, as we understand it, is a later invention, but I still like it. Okay, let's keep going.
A wise man does not speak before one who is greater than he in wisdom, and does not break into his fellow's speech, and is not hasty to answer.
I'm a little nervous to interrupt you here, Bobby.
In big trouble.
Because you'd be a golem. He asks what is relevant, and he answers to the point. And he speaks of the first point first, and of the last point last. And concerning that which he has not heard, he says, I have not heard. And he acknowledges the truth. And the reverse of these are characteristics in a clod. Apparently, they're all clods.
Was it Renee who compared this to like folk wisdom, right? Like, this is my uncle complaining. That's what we're seeing here, right?
Yeah,
but wow.
And this is also completely romanticized, fictionalized. When have we ever even experienced this? Ever?
Never.
I mean, the wise people in all of this stuff are interrupting each other all the time.
And always going off on tangents.
Exactly.
Well, if any of us were anything like that paragraph, we'd never get to say a word because there's always someone with more wisdom. We just have to always be quiet.
Like someone who thinks they have more wisdom.
Well.
So, right, like, this is the voice of someone who spent too much time in Talmud, whether it was in 2020 or 200 BCE. Yeah.
Here's another 7. Wow, this is
do another one. This one's a little meatier.
7 kinds of punishment come to the world for 7 categories of transgression. When some of them give tithes and others do not give tithes, a famine from drought comes. Some go hungry and others are satisfied.
Okay, pause for a second.
Okay.
I think we're getting some critique of selfishness. we're getting some economic systemic critiques that are happening here.
Yeah.
So what's the setup? First of all, what are tithes? Let's make sure we understand that.
I thought tithe was helping somebody.
Well, it's
Okay.
contributing a tenth of your wealth.
Right.
Well, the 10th came later. Giving a portion.
It's actually biblical, actually.
Oh, okay.
It's
But
like
it's like
you
it's
give a
helping.
tenth of your produce to either the priests or to the poor people.
Right.
What word in contemporary English is closest to the concept? Anyone want to throw out a contender?
Taxes.
Yeah.
It's not that voluntary charity kind of thing. It is more your requirement as a member of the community to tithe. It's like a tax to support the whole community.
Or your dues.
Someone else's fault.
How about your
Right. So what happens when some people pay their taxes and others don't pay the taxes that they should be paying?
Become president.
Some people go hungry and others are
From the arch
satisfied.
golem.
The
Right?
infrastructure
Like,
breaks down.
is this not talking about us right now?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Absolutely.
Keep going.
It's so relevant.
When they have all decided to give, when they have all decided not to give tithes, a famine from tumult and drought comes.
Meaning
they-
what?
Yeah,
People
meaning
They're
People
punished.
starve.
We are all going to die.
Right. There's punishment.
Well, it means society has fallen apart. There's if
Oh,
people,
maybe they mean anarchy. Tumult, anarchy. What's the Hebrew word for tumult? What's the word they're using there? I mean, I'm trying to figure out what they mean by tumult.
Confusion, chaos.
Chaos, anarchy. Okay.
Basically, if you don't tithe, you destroy society. The whole infrastructure breaks down.
Yeah. Okay, keep going.
When they have in addition decided not to set apart the dough offering.
Meaning when they treat their bread as if it's theirs and
It's all
not
theirs.
at some level a part of public property. In the
Right,
day,
and
like I
all-consuming-
earn it.
An all-consuming famine comes.
Yeah.
Pestilence comes to the world for sins punishable by death according to the Torah, but which have not been referred to the court, and for neglect of the law regarding the fruits of the sabbatical year. The sword comes to the
Right?
world.
Hold on.
Okay.
Why does pestilence enter into the world? Because courts don't administer courts of justice, and because humans don't follow the redistribution of wealth that's required by the Torah.
Yeah, this is like a really good social justice section.
Right, isn't it? Yeah.
Perfect. The sword comes to the world for the delay of judgment and for the perversion of judgment, and because of those who teach the Torah not in accordance with the accepted law. So they're
Okay.
talking about the perversion, like it's almost like people in power are perverting what should happen, what it says in the Torah. Is that what they're saying?
Yeah.
Revolution, American Revolution, just about the Cuban Revolution with Castro. When government no longer takes care of the people, whenever government becomes corrupt, the people revolt. The sword.
All right. So let's look at this next text here. There are 4 types of characters. I think these 2 are in conversation at some level. Will someone read this?
there are 4 types of character in human beings. One that says, mine is mine, yours is yours. This is a commonplace type. And
Okay, pause for a second. So the word in Hebrew, I'm going to take this apart. Zomidah, and midah is a word many of us have heard, right? Like a character trait. Benonit, like it's in the middle, meaning like you find it all the time. It's pretty close to the word for like a medium drink at Starbucks in Israel. Right? It's something that is really common. But now read this next line, Lisa.
And some say this is a Sodom type of character.
Okay. So this is one of those enormous differences that's just like lakes apart from each other between Christian understandings of the Sodom and Gomorrah story and Jewish understandings. And what within Christian understandings and certainly within sort of like public colloquial use, what is the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah?
Homosexuality.
Homosexuality, right? It's where we get the word sodomy from.
Right.
What's the sin according to Jewish sources? Anyone know?
Well, according to, I believe it was Jeremiah, it was inhospitality.
Inhospitality in particular too?
Orphans and strangers.
Strangers and the poor.
Yeah.
That was it. That's enough.
There's a whole series of little stories about Sodom and Gomorrah that I read over the years, and they have like the story: a man comes to town and he's crossed through the desert and he's hungry, and he goes to a place and they go, well, can't sell you anything, but here's you a piece of gold, and it's marked.
Yeah, we've studied some of these together where they, yeah, exactly. Yeah, nice. I forgot about those. There are all of these stories, but the fundamental idea with it is income inequality, the unfair distribution of resources, and the hoarding of resources at the very top of the social pyramid. That becomes the theme, which is why a saying that says "mine is mine and yours is yours" in Pirkei Avot is called, that is a Sodom style mindset.
Yeah.
Okay, let's keep going.
One that says mine is yours and yours is mine is an unlearned person. One that says
has anyone, do we know that phrase, Am Haaretz? Have people encountered that before?
Yes. It generally means, I think, kind of an uneducated, maybe in English would call it a yokel, a kind of a person of the earth, literally, or a people of the earth, but it has the sense of being an uneducated yokel, kind of, right? Something like that.
Kind of salt of the earth.
Not salt, I don't think. More
Well,
kind
no,
of like,
I mean, it's not literally, but I think it's not necessarily an insult.
No.
oh, okay. I've always heard it as a little bit of an insult.
Well,
It's kind of simple-minded.
Marion, it really can't be, because Haaretz is the main newspaper in Israel, right?
Don't follow that argument.
It's not really simple-minded. It's uncomplicated.
Unsophisticated.
There you go.
Okay.
I like salt of the earth better.
Okay.
So the word that I would use as a St. Louisan, and I mean this in the St. Louis way, not in the non-St. Louis way, is Hoosier.
A Hoosier.
He's a Hoosier. It's a hick. Actually, the truth of it is probably the closest. We almost have the same idiom in English, right? Am haaretz is a person of the earth. I'd suggest that it's basically the same idea as redneck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Redneck is bad.
Yes, it's unlearned, but it's also, right, like think about the origins of redneck. It's a redneck because you're working in the fields all day as opposed to studying Gemara all day.
Yeah.
So it's a person who works the earth literally as opposed to someone who's studying in the university.
Okay.
Right? Or as Sarah Palin calls them, real Americans.
Oh, Sarah Palin. Is she still alive?
I think so.
She's divorced.
I didn't say.
Okay, let's keep going.
I didn't know.
One that says mine is yours and yours is a pious person. One that says mine is mine and yours is mine is a wicked person.
Sure.
Okay.
True that.
I don't know how much other wisdom we get here. I kind of like the first line. The rest of it is a little on the nose for me. But anyone have some thoughts?
I'm still stuck on Haaretz. Why is that the name of the newspaper, Danny?
So Haaretz is the land.
Land.
Haaretz
Yeah.
are
Sorry,
like
Bobby. I didn't know you really meant it. Okay.
So you simply by saying Haaretz is of the land, of the earth, right?
no, not im like Am Yisrael, like the people of Israel, Am Yisrael.
Right.
These are people of the land.
Farmers.
Yeah, but it means farmers like we mean Hoosier.
Yeah.
Like people of the country, unsophisticated, like Renee said.
Bumpkins.
Well,
yeah,
that's not always
Sophisticated people.
negative. I mean, it's just
no, and there's even references to the wisdom of common folk. But yeah,
right.
But the newspaper's called that because it's about Israel and it's the Aretz. It's nothing to do with
But I
that
guess-
usage of the word.
We
But I guess-
went past that already, Jen. We're talking about the whole word now.
I've been talking about the whole world. I don't know where you've been. So I came back
I've
to
been listening. You skipped the line.
No, I said it like 20 minutes ago.
I got it. Don't worry.
But how about
Question
I'm
answer.
hearing stuff later and earlier.
Okay.
hold on. I think Lisa was going to say something.
well, we're getting stuck on
A word.
it's interesting because it says mine is yours and yours mine. And it basically seems to be suggesting that you're living in a very uncomplicated society.
Very.
In other words, that, and that would be sort of something like, in a family, perhaps, or within a small unit, you can live that way. And it makes sense in that setting.
Yeah.
But, and so it's an uncomplicated world, whereas the notion that what's mine is yours and what's yours is yours, understanding a world that can easily become, what do I want to say? It's easily a world unkind. And
You're going to starve to death.
so hard on not feeling like you have to take everything from everybody else.
Nice. Yeah, beautiful. Okay, other thoughts here. So I thought maybe with our last couple of minutes, we'd jump back to chapter 1 and go over a couple of the greatest hits with a different read than maybe you got. I've got a couple of these texts that I read, I think, pretty dramatically differently with our last few minutes here. So let's go back to maybe one of the most famous. There's a lot of greatest hits in Pirkei Avot, but I think this is one of the more famous ones. Okay.
Here it is.
Let's look at this whole section. It's the third one that I actually want to look at, but we're going to go through the first two because they serve as one continuous pericope here. So will someone start here with Mishnah 12, Hillel and Shammai? And just a little background. Did someone want to just quickly explain Hillel and Shammai and their relationship and who they are?
Well, they're competing schools of rabbinic approach. And usually Hillel is identified with the more compassionate, the more humane, and Shammai is identified with the more rigorous, the more rule-bound. And in most cases where they disagree with each other, basically tradition has come down on the side of Hillel, with I think maybe just 2 exceptions.
Great, thank you. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so let's jump in.
Hillel and Shammai received the oral tradition from them.
Okay, so this is the part, just to frame this, this is a part of Pirkei Avot where, right, we talked about the verse that we're not supposed to talk about, the one at the beginning that you've heard 6 times, right? That gives the lineage. But the rest of chapter 1 frames itself as a continuation of that lineage. And so we're actually going through a chronology, and now we're getting to Hillel and Shammai, if that makes sense.
Hillel used to say, be of the disciples of Aaron, loving peace and pursuing peace, loving mankind and drawing them close to the Torah.
Okay, beautiful.
He also used to say, one who makes his name great causes his name to be destroyed. One who does not add to his knowledge causes it to cease. One who does not study Torah deserves death. One who makes unworthy use of the crown of learning shall pass away.
Okay, let's take that one apart for a second. What's Hillel saying?
Wow.
Not to be vain about your own name and to make sure you study for study's sake Torah correctly.
Nice. Nice. Right there. There's an awareness there that authority of any sort can be dangerous and can be an avenue for abuse.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, and now the famous line, the one we're actually going towards that I wanted to take on. Go ahead and read this, and let's read it. We'll read it the whole thing, and then let's go back and read it first or piece by piece.
He also used to say, if I am not for myself, who is for me? But if I am for my own self only, what am I? And if not now, when?
Okay, this is a really famous line for Pirkei Avot. Has everyone encountered this in some way or another before?
Oh, yeah.
Do you know Rabbi
right?
Susan's famous story about asking Sarika to clean up her room?
I don't
she
think I
said to
remember.
Sarika, if not now, when? And Sarika said, later, Mom, later. So yeah, I think we've lived this one. Shammai used to say, make your study of the Torah.
No, hold on. I want to take this one apart. I want to take this apart. What's Hillel talking about?
I mean, this reminds me of your favorite story of having the two pieces of paper, one in each pocket.
Okay.
And that you need both pieces of paper. You need to.
There you go, Bobby.
Thank you. You need to love yourself. You need to see yourself as the center of attention, but you also need to see that you're a mere crumb, and that there's a whole world outside of you.
I have no crumbs.
So I think Lisa is honing in totally on why this has become such a classic text. I personally think Hillel is talking about something totally different.
Whoa.
I think you're talking about exactly how this text has always been read. I think Hillel's talking about war. I think he's talking about battle with the Romans. And I think he's saying, if I'm only for me and I'm not for my people, then what's the point? And if not now, when? I think this is a call to arms.
Great.
Now you're sounding like Rabbi Zimmond. Who this is exactly. He kept pointing out that they were in war with Romans.
Yeah.
And a lot of this is very political, although we forget that when we read
You
it.
don't see the politics. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's always throughout everything that we've read tonight, if I see a thread running through everything, it's this search for balance. A little bit of this, but not too much. A little bit of that, but don't overdo it or don't misuse it. Don't, I mean, there's this, and, of course, balance is an imaginary point. You never actually achieve it. You're always up or down, but it's the search for it.
Yeah, I'm searching.
Where the worthiness lies.
So maybe one last text. Did we do, did anyone do number 21, the famous one? Rabbi Tarfon says, no?
No.
Not me.
I think it's 21. We'll see if I remember that. Nope, there aren't 18 verses and there are only 18.
Rabbi Tarfon.
I thought it was in one. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's in chapter 2. Yeah. Let's see.
What is today? Tuesday.
Rabbi Said.
Search for Tarfon.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah.
Takes the fun out of it.
Thank
No,
you,
it
Lisa.
Well,
Okay.
you'll the interesting things with the numbers is that it's important that 3 is the triangle and the triangle is the most stable. 7 is what you get when you have circular objects, and if they are all the same size, you get 6 on the outside and 1 in the middle.
Huh.
And that's the perfect tight packing. And then 10 turns out it makes a pyramid. It's 4 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1.
Wow.
And it actually makes a pyramid shape. And so this was a time that was where the geometry of these numbers was, as important as anything else as well.
And this is where being a math teacher comes right in.
Can't help it.
I've never heard it present. That was so interesting, Lisa. I've never heard anything like that.
I love it.
Yeah.
And just to
That's great,
clarify
Lisa.
that 6 in 1, think of the hexagons of like the way pencils pack or a honeycomb.
Right.
So
Yeah.
she means the hexacomb with the center
Right.
point gives
The
you
one
the
Oh, is that why they?
And it's
Oh,
perfect
It's a pencil.
packing. basically.
That's what she means by
So-
perfect packing. There's no way
Show and
it
tell.
all fits together. It's no space.
Okay, let's do this one last Mishnah. Actually, it's 2 last Mishnahs, but let's do them anyhow. Another sort of greatest hits that I think is worth a deeper dive.
Rabbi Toff said, "The day is short and the work is plentiful, and the laborers are indolent, and the reward is great, and the master of the house is insistent."
Okay, what is the day? Let's take apart this metaphor. What is the day?
The workday?
Life. Human life.
Oh,
Life.
life, of course.
Possibly the lifespan of everyone on Earth.
Yeah. What is the work?
Probably.
Mankind. Prayer.
Probably farming.
I think it's like
Making a
studying
righteous
Torah.
world.
Yeah.
Say it again, Marion.
Making a righteous world.
Fixing the world, right? Making it the world it should be.
Yeah, Tikkun Olam.
Oh,
Who are the laborers?
We are the indolent people.
Yeah, we're
Humans
lazy.
are the indolent people. What's the reward?
The world to come.
Maybe the world to come, maybe the world, this world as it should be, right?
A better world.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the master of the house?
God.
God.
Okay. This next, does anyone recognize this yet? Does anyone recognize this Mishnah? You're going to recognize the next line. The next line I can sing, like it's a song, childhood song.
Yeah, I know. This is great. Yeah.
Okay, someone take the next one. Go ahead.
I thought you were going to sing it.
Sing it.
Lo alecha ligmor, oh baby.
Oh my gosh.
See how easily this turns into camp songs.
Exactly, right? Yeah. I probably could pick up a guitar and play it, and I haven't played it in 20 years.
I'm surprised Randy didn't do this one.
Okay, so let's read this next Mishnah here, this last one in the chapter.
He, Rabbi Toffon, used to say, "It is not your duty to finish the work."
What is the work? Hold on. Let's take it apart as we go. What is the work?
The Tikkun Olam.
Repair the world, right? Yeah. They mean it like we mean the word Tikkun Olam, even if the phrase Tikkun Olam would have meant nothing to them.
Right,
but
right.
yeah. Okay.
But
So you don't
neither,
have to finish the work of repairing the world.
but neither
Keep
are
going.
you at liberty to neglect it. If you have
Right.
studied much Torah, you
Hold on,
should-
pause there for a second, because
Okay.
that is the classic line, right? It is not your duty to finish the work, but neither are you. Usually the classic translation is neither are you free to deceased from it.
Mhm.
Right? This is, so someone asked the question about messianism. Was it in this shiur or was it in Talmud? I don't remember.
Talmud.
It's basically the same faces. Now we have Lisa and Stan. We don't want to leave you out there. But we asked this question about messianism. This is an answer about messianism that says, no, don't focus it on it as a real thing, right? This is not an achievable messianism. This is, you do the work of repair with the belief that maybe eventually we'll get there, but not in our life.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not given permission to be resigned.
Yeah. This is like a mantra for the Trump era.
Apathy is evil.
Exactly.
Yeah, something like that.
Resistance.
And you're also, you can't be smug.
Ah.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm listening. My dog is barking at the neighbor, and I'm trying to get her to stop. Come here. Stop it.
Lisa, repeat what you said. It was good.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
I just said it's also saying you can't be smug
Right.
and satisfied with where you are.
Right.
Nice. Nice. Okay. This is our May University series.
Yay.
What happens in June?
Round applause.
Let me give a plug. Thursday, Shavuos, we're going to be studying all night, starting at 7:00. We'll be going all night. And at my 11:30 section, I'm telling the story of who wrote the Bible.
And Karen will be asleep.
And Karen will be asleep, and the kids will be asleep.
Yeah.
We got to count the Omer, though.
Yeah.
Danny, before we do that, do you know the topic for next month for the university series?
So it's not 100% decided. It's going to be divided up amongst the rabbis again. I think the last 2 weeks are going to be a special mini series that Karen's putting together, where we have a dear friend who's a brilliant professor who has her PhD in sort of feminism within the ultra-Orthodox community.
Whoa.
Wow.
Including her recent research is on the Maharat movement, like Maharat Rory Picker-Nice. So we're hoping to do 2 sessions with her. Her name's Michal, Dr. Michal Raucher. The first section will be like nominally about sort of demystifying the series Unorthodox and giving some context to it. And we're hoping this. And she's brilliant. Michal is brilliant and wonderful and kind and a great teacher and like all of the things that you should be. And then the second session we're hoping will be Michal in conversation with Maharat Rory Picker-Nice, the head of the JCRC, about her current research. So we think both will be really exciting. Karen and I sat in on one Michal did for her community, and it was just like amazing. And so afterwards, we thought this should happen, but that won't be till the end of the month. So I don't know what the beginning is, but stay tuned.